Welcome to today's lesson on the domino effect that led to the American Revolution. Today we'll explore how the Enlightenment ideas, rising taxes and protests, powerful propaganda, and divided patriot and loyalist viewpoints all worked together to push the colonies toward the American Revolution. Let's dive in. Imagine a long line of dominoes standing perfectly in a row. One small push, and suddenly everything's set into motion. Events fall one after another, each causing the next. This is exactly how the American Revolution unfolded.
Enlightenment ideas.
Before the first protest, before the first gunshot, and long before anyone talked openly about independence, something else had begun to shift. The way colonists thought about government. The shift started with the Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke, Montesquieu, Rousseau. And Locke argued that every human being is born with natural rights, life, liberty, and property. He believed governments exist only to protect these rights, and if a government fails, the people have the right to replace it. These ideas spread throughout Europe and eventually across the Atlantic. For many colonists, these ideas were eye-opening. They encouraged people to question authority, to think about freedom, and to imagine a government based on the consent rather than inherited power. Leaders like Jefferson, Adams, and Franklin read these words closely and slowly, and the first domino tipped. People began to ask an important question: if the government is supposed to protect our rights, is the British government still doing that?
Taxes, protest, and violence.
The next dominoes in our chain reaction were economic. After the French and Indian War, Britain found itself deeply in debt. Parliament believed that the colonists should help pay for their protection and military expenses, so new taxes were introduced. The Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, and the Townshend Act placed duties on everyday goods: paper, tea, sugar, and glass. But the issue wasn't about the amount of tax. The real problem was the colonists had no voice in making these decisions. They protested under the slogan, "No taxation without representation." Protests grew into boycotts, and boycotts grew into confrontations. Tensions rose, especially in Boston, where British soldiers were stationed to enforce the laws. In 1770, a street confrontation turned deadly with the Boston Massacre. 5 colonists were killed, and anger spread. Parliament cracked down even harder with the Intolerable Acts, shutting down Boston Harbor and limiting colonial self-government. Each response by Britain pushed the colonies even further away, and by the time the shots were fired at Lexington and Concord in 1775, the final dominoes of rebellion had already been set in motion.
Role of propaganda.
One event that dramatically influenced colonial opinion was the Boston Massacre, but not just because of what happened. Much of its power came from how it was portrayed. Paul Revere created a famous engraving titled The Bloody Massacre. It showed the British soldiers in a perfectly organized line firing directly into a peaceful, unarmed crowd. But this was not an accurate depiction. The real event was chaotic. Snowballs and insults were thrown, and no one knew who yielded the order to fire. The soldiers looked threatened, not calm and orderly. But Revere didn't want to tell that exact story. He wanted to send a message. His engraving was a powerful piece of propaganda. It stirred anger, strengthened patriot support, and helped unify the colonies against the British authority. This engraving spread across the colonies quickly, shaping public opinion long before newspapers could even print detailed accounts.
Patriots versus loyalists.
As tensions increased, colonists were divided. Not everyone agreed about how to respond to British rule. Patriots believed that the British had violated their natural rights, and they felt that independence was the only way to protect their liberty. Patriots argued that people have the right to form a new government if the old one becomes abusive. These colonists supported boycotts, protests, and eventually armed resistance. But loyalists saw things very differently. They believed that the British Empire brought stability and legal protection and economic strength. Many loyalists feared that the revolt would lead to chaos, violence, and possibly the destruction of their homes and businesses. They felt loyalty to the crown, and it was safer and more honorable than a rebellion. These two viewpoints remind us that the path to independence was not as simple or unanimous. It was debated in homes, taverns, town meetings, and newspapers all across the 13 colonies.
The Declaration of Independence.
When we put all the dominoes together, Enlightenment ideas, unfair taxation, rising protests, violent clashes, persuasive propaganda, and divided colonial viewpoints, we can see how the American Revolution became inevitable. Each step pushed the colonies further from compromise and closer to independence. By 1776, the final domino fell. The colonists declared themselves free from British rule, and the American Revolution was not the result of a single moment, but rather a chain reaction, years in the making, one event leading to the next, until change became unstoppable. That concludes today's lesson. Click the pause button to discuss the review questions.